You do not approach a broken company the way most people approach an opportunity, hopeful, already sketching out the upside before you have even sat down. You approach it the way a field medic approaches a wreck, quiet, methodical, already sorting what can be saved from what cannot. Right now, you are looking at a commercial laundry and uniform supply operation outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. 35 employees, a 22,000 square foot leased facility, industrial washing and pressing equipment that an appraiser might value anywhere between $600,000 and $900,000, depending on how motivated that appraiser happens to be feeling. The owner is a second-generation operator who took the business over from his father 12 years ago. He is sitting across from you at a card table set up in what used to be the dispatch office because the real desk was sold 3 weeks ago through an online listing his niece put together for him. His shirt is pressed, which strikes you as almost funny given what the business does, but his eyes tell you he has not slept properly in a month. He is asking for $3,100,000. You already know the number you are going to offer is $650,000. You have done this 19 times over the last 11 years. You do not buy struggling companies. You buy collapsing ones. The ones where the bank has already sent a second letter this month. The ones where the owner has started searching online for what actually happens when a payroll cannot be met. The ones every private equity fund, every strategic buyer, every regional bank loan officer has already quietly walked away from because the story attached to the business has stopped being about growth and started being about survival. That is where you live. You have never once tried to live anywhere else. People ask how you ended up doing this for a living, and you tell them honestly that you never planned it. Years ago, you bought a struggling pest control route in eastern Nebraska for $45,000, thinking you were buying trucks, customer contracts, and a modest recurring income stream. What you actually bought was 2 aging service vehicles, a client list full of accounts that had not been serviced properly in months, and an undisclosed dispute with a former technician who claimed he had never been paid overtime he was legally owed. You did not attempt to fix any of it. You sold both vehicles to a competing route operator for $22,000, licensed the surviving client accounts to a technician who wanted to go independent for $19,000, and settled the wage dispute for $6,000. Net result, you walked away with $58,000 on a $45,000 purchase in just under 11 weeks, along with an education that mattered far more than the profit. You did not learn how to build a business. You learned how to read one that was already dying. How to look past whatever story the owner was still telling himself and locate the actual value sitting underneath the collapse. That is a completely different skill than building something from nothing. And most people who are gifted at building are surprisingly bad at this. Show a builder a struggling business and their instinct fires immediately toward fixes. New marketing, new leadership, new systems. That instinct is not wrong. It is just wrong for this particular kind of work, and you spent years deliberately training yourself out of it. When you evaluate a collapsing company, you are not asking whether it can be saved. That question belongs to people who fall in love with a narrative, the family legacy, the loyal staff, the grandfather who started the whole thing in a rented garage in 1964. You respect that story. You genuinely do, having sat across enough exhausted owners to know the thing they built was real, and the grief they are feeling watching it fall apart is real too. You simply cannot let any of that steer the arithmetic. The actual question is what the highest value exit looks like from where the business currently sits. Sometimes that is a slow rebuild. More often, it is an organized breakup. Either way, you decide within the first 2 days, because every day after that, the remaining value keeps eroding. 4 years ago, there was a deal in Reno, Nevada, involving a small chain of 3 auto detailing shops, family run across 2 generations. The son had taken control from his mother and expanded aggressively, opening a 4th location, financing new equipment, hiring a dedicated manager at each site. Then a recession hit demand hard. Then the manager running the flagship location was caught diverting cash and vanished to Idaho. Then the son's marriage fell apart around the same time. By the time you got the call, 2 of the 4 shops were not opening on schedule because nobody reliable was left to unlock the doors. You flew out, spent a day and a half walking every location, interviewing the few employees still showing up, reviewing lease terms, calling the equipment lender directly. You had coffee alone at a diner near the flagship shop and worked out numbers on a napkin for close to an hour. By the time you left, you already knew your plan. You bought all 4 locations for $150,000. You closed 2 immediately, gave both landlords the required 60-day notice, and sold the detailing equipment from those sites to a regional auto reconditioning broker for $30,000 combined. You kept the remaining 2 profitable shops running with a lean skeleton crew while quietly locating a growing detailing franchise group looking to expand into the Nevada market. 5 months later, you sold them both operating locations as a package for $290,000 and separately sold the customer databases from the 2 closed shops to the same buyer for another $18,000. Total invested was $150,000. Total returned was $338,000, including equipment proceeds, across roughly 7 months, and you never once picked up a detailing tool yourself. Back to Tulsa. You have spent 2 full days inside a records room stacked with binders nobody had touched in years because this particular family kept almost nothing digital, which is somehow both endearing and alarming at once. You have reviewed 3 years of financial statements, every equipment lease, every vendor agreement, every personnel file. You pulled the underlying real estate documents. You quietly called 3 regional uniform and linen service brokers without telling the seller you were doing it. Here is what you now know. The core business is finished. Revenue has fallen 57% over 3 years. Their largest account, a hospital network representing over 1/3 of annual billing, brought its laundry operation in-house 8 months ago. What remains is a scattered collection of small, inconsistent contracts that cannot support the overhead on their own. You could inject $300,000 into sales, hire an experienced general manager, restructure pricing across every remaining account, and you would still be fighting an industry in structural decline that was always going to catch up to a company this size eventually. Institutional laundry services have been consolidating for over a decade. You are not going to reverse that. But here is the second half of what you know. Those washing and pressing lines are running at a small fraction of their rated capacity, and a regional linen consolidator based in Kansas City has been quietly acquiring exactly this kind of equipment for a new distribution hub. You already had an informal call with them. They are interested. At $580,000 for the equipment alone, you are already recovering close to 90 cents on every dollar you are putting in before doing anything else. The surviving client contracts, modest as they are, hold real value for a smaller local competitor who would rather buy relationships than spend a year building them from nothing. You have already identified 2 realistic buyers and expect somewhere between $65,000 and $85,000 there. The facility lease has 11 months remaining. The landlord wants a paying tenant and has already mentioned standing with you in the loading dock while the owner was inside, a logistics company that has been circling the space. An early termination with a modest cash incentive, likely $30,000 to $40,000, lets everyone exit cleaner than they probably deserve. Run the full math. $650,000 in, $580,000 from the equipment sale, $75,000 from the client contracts, $35,000 from the lease termination. That is roughly $690,000 out before you have even touched the receivables you plan to collect aggressively over the following 60 days, or the raw linen and detergent inventory sitting in the warehouse that a distributor will take at 55 cents on the dollar. All told, you are looking at close to a 30% return inside 5 months with essentially zero ongoing operational involvement. This is the part most people misunderstand about this work. They picture distressed acquisition as a rescue story, the drama of pulling something back from the edge, the tidy headline about a struggling family business and a savvy buyer and jobs preserved, and an American dream renewed. That version does happen sometimes, and you have lived it more than once. There was a landscaping company in Boise, Idaho that only needed a competent operations manager and better routing software, where the underlying work was fine and the administration was simply chaos. There was a candle manufacturer in rural Vermont whose product was genuinely excellent and whose owner had quietly stopped functioning after a brutal divorce. There was a small chain of martial arts studios in Utah that just needed a real operator and a renegotiated set of leases, where you brought in management, restructured the rent, and sold the whole chain 16 months later to a fitness holding company. Those deals felt good, and you will not pretend otherwise. There is something genuinely satisfying about watching a business come back to life. But those same deals were consistently among your lowest returns. Your best returns have always come from the deals where you recognized fastest that saving the business was never actually the right move, where you looked at what remained, mapped its value, broken apart piece by piece, and moved quickly before the situation deteriorated further. Every additional week, a dying business stays alive in the wrong hands. It loses more of what made it valuable in the first place. Equipment gets neglected. Skilled staff quietly start updating their resumes and leave for something stable. Customers drift toward competitors. Vendors tighten credit terms or stop shipping entirely. The longer a failing company lingers, the less of it remains worth salvaging, and that clock never once runs in your favor. Your real advantage is not operational expertise, not turnaround strategy, not deep knowledge of any single industry, although you have absorbed a surprising amount of each over the years by necessity. Your real advantage is recognizing exactly which parts of a dying company still hold genuine value and moving before decay reaches them. You have come to view a failing business the way a salvage crew views a sunken vessel, not mourning what it used to be, but carefully mapping exactly what can still be pulled up and put to use. Most people look at a collapsing company and see a problem waiting to be solved. You look at the same company and see a map. Every few weeks, someone reaches out wanting to learn how you actually do this. Usually younger guys who read about distressed acquisitions somewhere online and have convinced themselves there is a repeatable formula hiding underneath it. You take those calls when you have the time. You tell all of them the same thing. There is no formula. There is only a willingness to look directly at failure without flinching, and the discipline to act before sentiment starts costing you real money. Finding the deals themselves is rarely the hard part. Distress is everywhere once you know how to spot it. The hard part is the room. Sitting across from someone who built a piece of their life from nothing and watching them slide the paperwork toward you, fully aware of exactly what you intend to do with it once they leave. Some of them cry right there at the table. One man outside Erie, Pennsylvania, a small boat building shop, a genuinely good one that had simply run out of runway, did not say a single word when the papers were signed. He just walked out to his truck in the gravel lot and sat there for nearly 20 minutes before finally driving away. You watched him through the window the entire time. You did not know what to do with that feeling, so eventually you turned back to the financials on the table. You still think about him more often than you would admit out loud. You buy exactly what everyone else is running from. The bank circling the Tulsa laundry business has no interest in owning industrial washing equipment. The owner has no interest in managing a slow public wind down while his employees and his family watch it happen. The staff do not want the uncertainty dragging on for another 8 months, while their chances of landing somewhere stable quietly shrink. The vendors do not want to keep extending credit into a hole they already sense they will never recover from. Everyone attached to this deal wants out immediately, and that shared urgency is exactly why a deal exists at all. You become the answer to everyone's problems simultaneously, which is precisely why you can buy today for $650,000 what someone might have paid $2 million for 18 months earlier. Distress is not simply a condition. It functions as a pricing mechanism, and you have built an entire career being the one person consistently willing to show up once everyone else has decided showing up is no longer worth it. That comfort with broken things was never something you sat down and manufactured deliberately. You stumbled into it through that pest control route in Nebraska, chose to walk toward it again afterward, and sharpened it slowly across 19 deals and more highway motels than you could accurately count. You can drive past a row of thriving storefronts with healthy balance sheets and feel absolutely nothing. Then you find one business quietly bleeding out in a half-empty strip mall somewhere, and something inside you snaps immediately into focus. It still happens every time. The owner slides the signed letter of intent back across the card table. His hands are steadier than you expected, though plenty of them shake at this exact moment. He is looking at you the way people in this situation always look at you, somewhere between relief and resentment, gratitude and grief tangled together. You stopped trying to untangle that expression a long time ago. It never changes what happens next. He asks whether you are actually going to close this. It barely lands as a question. You do not lie to him. You never have with any of them. You tell him honestly that you are not certain yet, that it depends on a couple of conversations you have not had. That much is true. There is a real chance the Kansas City Consolidator decides to keep a small satellite operation running in Tulsa instead of shutting it down entirely. You will know within 2 weeks. You do not mention that possibility to him out loud. because false hope at this particular moment would be its own quiet cruelty. He nods slowly and picks up his coffee, studying it for a second like it said something he was not expecting. You pick up the pen. You feel no particular pride in this moment and no particular shame either. You stopped performing either reaction years ago. This is simply the work, the same work it has always been. A collapsing company. A price nobody else was willing to pay. A quiet decision sitting underneath everything else in the room. Nurse it back to life or take it apart cleanly before it can waste another single day. You sign.